As you go into your initial jump, the hinge joint of the phalanges goes into extension. The plane joint in your carpals is an extension as well. As you throw your arms up, the hinge joint in your elbow is an extension. The ball and socket joint that connects your humerus and clavicle is an elevation and extension. Throughout the initial jump, your neck stays neutral. The ball and socket joint that joins your femur and pelvic girdle is an extension. The hinge joint in your knees is an extension. The plane joint of your tarsals is in plantar flexion. Your toes, which are hinge joints, start in extension and go into flexion as you jump up.
Here you have fallen from your jump and have come down close to the ground in a crouched position. At this point, your joints have made many movements. As you can see, the hinge joints between your metacarpals and phalanges remain in extension. The plane joints between the carpals and the radius also remain in extension. However, when you come down from your jump, the hinge joints between the humerus and the radius go back into flexion. As you bring your humerus back towards your side, the ball and socket joint, called your acromioclavicular joint, goes into depression and flexion. The ball and socket joints joining the femurs and the pelvic girdle also go into flexion as you go into a crouched position. In order to absorb the shock of your landing, the hinge joint between your femur and tibia goes into flexion. In order to account for your forward shifted center of gravity, the plane joints between your tibia and tarsals goes into dorsiflexion. The hinge joints between your metatarsals and phalanges go back into extension.
We have the second step, where the hinge joint in the phalanges are in full extension, along with the plane joints of the wrist. Then we move down to the elbow, and we see that it is also an extension and bears a large portion of the body's weight. Next, we see the AC joint of the shoulder in partial circumduction and extension. The hips are also in extension, along with both knees. Our ankles are in dorsiflexion, and the toes are in full extension.
As you draw your legs in, the hinge joint in your phalanges are in extension. The plane joint in your wrist are in full extension, and the hinge joint between your radius and your humerus are in extension. The ball and socket joint in your shoulders are in partial circumduction as you swing your body forward. The hips are in flexion, and the hinge joint between your tibia and femur are in flexion. As you come in to land on your feet, the plane joint in your ankles are in dorsiflexion. As you land in the final position, the hinge joints in your feet are in extension.
This is step 4, the jump, starting from the top. The hinge joints in your phalanges are in extension throughout the jump. Your wrists, which are plane joints, are also in extension. Moving down, you can see the hinge joint in your elbow start in flexion and move to extension as you jump. And your shoulders go into elevation and extension. Moving on, your hips and knees also start in flexion and go to extension. Your ankles go from dorsi to plantar flexion.